Hi, my name's Trudie. I'm a member of the IQ Bar team and also one of the vloggers. This week's vlog is all about specific requirements, so things like SEN. So if you want to find out more, stay and watch. So for some lessons in the notes section, where you can see about your student, it might have some additional tailoring that you need to do, and it might state an interest. I'll show you where that is now. So when you log in, you'll see all the students that you've got lined up. When you click on details of the course, you'll see information about that student. When you scroll down, you'll see that there is a box where there'll be notes if there are any specific requirements for that student. So down here you'll see there's a box saying special requirements, and for this student there aren't any. But if your student has some that we are aware of, they will be listed here. Within this section, it might also list some kind of interest the student has. For example, if they've got an interest in travel or a particular love of trains, something that will help you in your planning. There'll also be notes if the student cannot access or use the whiteboard tools. So look for this and make sure that you plan appropriately for this in your lesson. Some of our students also don't have access to certain colours on the whiteboard. So if you see a little flag that looks like this, that means that they won't be able to access all the colours, so bear that in mind. You'll see this flag when you enter the classroom, and in the register list stating who's in the classroom, it'll say your student, and if that flag's next to them, you'll know they cannot use all the colours. So specific could also be a learning need, and it might not be stated in that section. It's important to bear in mind that special educational needs aren't widely accepted in China, so for some cases it might not be in the notes because we haven't been told about it. So what might these special requirements look like in the classroom, and how will you know if a child possibly has some special educational needs? So there's no one-fits-all approach here. So here are just some examples. It's important to be aware of issues like this so that you can understand and adapt appropriately. Some signs you might see are things like not responding or talking lessons, even after a few lessons. It might be that the Bready has trouble to stay focused on what you're learning about or to keep on topic. You might be talking about dinosaurs and they're talking about what they had for dinner last night. It might be that your Bready has a difficulty or struggles to sit there for a long period of time and to focus. So for them, that 25 minutes or that half an hour really might be pushing their boundaries to sit and watch the screen. Sometimes this can lead to them wandering off. So you might have a Bready that finds it difficult to sit and wants to sort of go off every now and again. You have to keep bringing them back into the lesson. There might be some more extreme examples, things like scratching or head banging or a repeated action, kind of like a tick. It could be that the Bready that you keep learning with is finding it really hard to retain the information that you're giving them, and that each week it doesn't seem like they're learning or making progress. It could be something a bit more obvious like a lisp, which means they really struggle with the pronunciation of some words. It's important to bear in mind that just because you see one of these things I've mentioned, that you automatically think, oh, that student must have additional learning needs. It might not be that. These are just some examples, and use your professional judgment to help. And if you're not sure, ask our designated safeguard lead, Sarah, and get her support in the matter. So what should you do if you're encountering some of these issues in the classroom, and how do you overcome them? The first thing to remember is do not get frustrated. Some of the Breadies might also find it really hard to read facial expressions. So try to make sure that you're being as positive as you can and avoid any angry looking faces. Try to use strategies to support them, and I'll suggest a few after this section, but keep trying and persevere. Then in your review, it's really important that you record any successful strategies, but equally anything that didn't work so well, but still be positive. So you might say something like, we tried X in this lesson, but we found that X preferred this. So you're still keeping it really positive, but you're also informing other teachers strategies that work, which will help the student and the teacher. As I've mentioned, if you think you have a student that might have additional learning needs, it's really important that you inform Sarah, our designated safeguarding lead. It is a safeguarding matter, and we want to be aware of these students so we can support and help them and make sure they're maximising their learning. So what strategies can you use to support these students? Again, here it's important to remember there's no one fits all, and what might work well for one student might not work for another. Or it might take a few lessons, or perhaps what started to work well eventually doesn't work well. It's all about being positive and persevering with these. For many students with additional needs, routine is essential, so stick to the IQ bar lesson structure. It's really good for consistency as a company, but also for those with additional needs. So you should have your introduction, a short icebreaker, your homework recap, your recap of the previous learning, introducing your new learning, and then setting the new homework at the end of the lesson. When giving instructions or using sentences, it's really important to keep them simple and clear, but also not to use any literal phrases which could be a bit confusing. So you probably try not to do this anyway, but things like, "You're on fire." If you've got a learner that has an additional need, they might take this literally, so you could really panic or worry them. So if you have a challenging learner who you think might have some additional needs, it's really important that alongside our trophy rewards, that you also use an extra positive reward incentive. So it could just be for things like watching the screen, answering a question. So it could be stars on a chart on a board, it could be smiley faces, something positive to reinforce the good things they are doing in lessons. If you have a student that's reluctant to talk, it might be really helpful to use a hook. So a hook could be an image, a physical object, a song, something of interest to them. This way, this might initiate some conversation. Also, if you know that they want to talk about that thing, you could say, if we have 15 minutes of learning time today, at the end we can talk about this. This might be a way of helping them to work towards talking in the lessons and being more involved. If perhaps your Bready finds it really difficult to focus, then make sure that your learning is in short snippets. This way, this will break up the learning and won't make it seem as long for them. It's also a really good opportunity to use some interactive activities with them. So not only will you be extending the Bready, but you'll also be finding a way that suits the learner's needs, again, meeting one of those teacher standards. If your Bready finds it really hard or difficult to sit and focus for a long period of time, find ways to incorporate movement into your lesson. So it could be something simple like actions, songs, movements, jumping around. What's a really good thing to use is something called brain gym. So you might want to have a look into that. It's basically simple movements that they copy off you, but it helps to keep the brain active, but also release that movement so that then they're ready to focus once they've finished. It's basically a bit like Simon Says. You just get them to copy the movements that you're doing. If you've got some of the behaviours like a child scratching or head banging or something along those lines, it's really important to see if there's a pattern when they're doing it. So make a note and forward this to Sarah, our designated safeguarding lead, about when you see these patterns or these things that they're doing happening, so that we can see if there's a pattern or something that's triggering these things to happen. If your student has a lisp, then getting them to keep repeating over and over and over the same word isn't going to help them because they can't pronounce the word. So don't force a child if they physically cannot say it. Like I've said, it's all about trial or error. Some of these things may work and some of them just might not. But it's important that you record what worked and what didn't. As a team, it's really important that we share strategies that work. So the chat group is a really good place to share these, but it's really important that when we're sharing these strategies, that we aren't saying who the student is or any specific details that could link back to that student. That is a safeguarding matter, so their name should not be used. Now, I'm sure you've heard many a time how important TPR and actions are in your lessons, but even more so with students with additional needs. They really need those actions to help them understand and reinforce the vocabulary. So if you want any help, if you want some advice, Feel free to come to the chat group and talk to people, or come to your team leader, or if it's something a bit more specific about an individual, then go to Sarah. As always, I hope this has been really helpful, and I'll see you soon. Bye.